Prof. Cook, we are live. You can start.
Thank you, I noticed. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everybody. And a warm welcome to you to this Imagining Innovations webinar series that's hosted by the Department of Family Medicine and Primary Care in conjunction with the Adler Museum. We're very excited about this webinar series. We have long considered as health sciences students and as health sciences faculty and clinicians that perhaps we're looking at our work and our engagement around the healthcare system with somewhat of a narrow viewpoint. And it is the Department of Family Medicine and Primary Care, not least for working in the first point of care setting, that really we need to be looking holistically at patients as people, at not only the biomedical model, but also the biopsychosocial model. And it's with that in mind that we first kicked off with our health system sciences courses, the development of HSS as really a pillar of health sciences and alongside clinical sciences and the more basic health sciences or biomedical sciences. And so really it's this webinar series has been born out of a willingness, a wish to essentially be slightly more curious colleagues, slightly more challenged, and really to cross-pollinate across the different interdependent components of the healthcare system, to be looking at how we can all benefit from a slightly more broader and more comprehensive view of our health system and the actors within it. So on the back of a successful webinar series of the pandemic pangolins, labeled and titled Pandemic Pangolins last year, we have launched this Imagining Innovations webinar series. Also with the pandemic in mind, and that we are now able and perhaps forced and pushed and the silver lining of thinking about things a little bit differently. So I'm really excited and I'm delighted and honored, as we are all within the department and at the Adler Museum, to be kicking off launching this webinar series. And of course, our particular topic today is indeed a very worthwhile and exciting one that we're looking at engaging on today. So thank you very much. And with that, enough from me, and allow me to pass on to Dr. Makunga, who will be hosting today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Cook, and a welcome to everyone who's in the webinar. I wish to first acknowledge my principals, both in the academic and scientific world and in the Western medical world. But I would not have done justice to this if I do not welcome my fellow traditional healers, Mkhulu, Gogo. Siyathokozisa, siyacama kusha kune makhosi, sithi bakube mhlophe makukhanye. Sithi kwenje sicela imvume yenu, sicela ukunibeka apha kule webinar, sicela ukuthi izihlole zenu zihambe nani, sicela ukuthi izihlole zenu zinikhokhele zinithethele. Sicela ukuthi makhosi ze kuthi xa sithethile apha kule webinar namhlanje kudede bonke ubumnyama kuvela ukukhanya. Sicela ukuthi xa sihamba siqhubekela phambili, sesihambe siphethe ulwazi lwemveli, ulwazi oluvela kudala komkhulu bethu nabokhokho, soluhlanganise nolwangoku njacamagusha. Firstly, I would like to say our webinar today, the topic is the Muthi we are all needing, or the Muthi we all need. Just a quick one, I want to highlight the fact that sadly, at this point in time, when we are talking about Muthi, many of the people think Muthi only as a concoction. And to be exact, many people, because of the introduction of the Witchcraft Act, which demonized everything that had to do with the indigenous intelligence, many people would be thinking when you are talking about Muthi, you are talking about a concoction for witchcraft. Muthi is not only a concoction. Muthi is truly all the healing herbs, medicines, concoctions, rituals, acts, including prayer, which are actually healing to an individual and to the nation. Having said that, I am going to wish to introduce to you our first speaker, Mkhulu Songindaba. Mkhulu Songindaba is an old and renowned traditional medical practitioner who is the founder and the head of Ichayimbi, which we call in the traditional healers fraternity is called Mkhulu Songindaba has trained many traditional health practitioners, both in Umdao, Umguni, Istunywa, and many other healing practices within the indigenous healing process. And Mkhulu Songindaba has worked with a number of organizations in bringing in medicinal healing usage of medicinal plants within both the Western world as a testing platform, and also has used such in his own healing practices. I'm going to hand over to Mkhulu Songindaba to take us through his experience and share with us. Today, this is truly just a friendly, warm, brotherly sharing platform, but we would wish for everyone to bring across the questions that they have and not be scared and think that maybe if they ask questions that would seem controversial, they would be offending any of them. Mkhulus. Siyathokoza Mkhulu Songindaba, over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the department for reaching out to us. This, I think, is a good start of what we all are wishing for, the integration of the various health systems, the indigenous one, which has been, in South Africa for a long time, centuries, as well as the allopathic medicine that came in at a certain stage. Both of them, they've got a role. None of them can exist without the other. That is for sure. I would like now to request that we start with the slides. I think today in this discussion, I just want to, whatever I'm going to say is going to be putting forward a case for an integrated healthcare system in South Africa. I'm going to do it from the humble, historical activities that we have been involved with. We are not really going to share anything that we have not been involved with, because it might be it might be speculation. So whatever I'm going to say here is something that we have been involved with. Can we move to the next? I think as an introduction, I'm not going to go through everything that is appearing on the slides, but I just want to highlight the issues that I strongly believe will be used as a springboard for discussion. I think firstly, I just want to say that the allopathic and also African traditional medicine healing systems, they originate from two different philosophies. One has got one philosophy, the other has got the other. And these two philosophies, they are there to collaborate. I don't think they are mutually exclusive. And if you look at the diagnostic systems or the way they diagnose, the illnesses or the challenges within the person, you'll find that the patient may display, physical symptoms, but there could be underlying hidden, conditions. Just as an example, I saw a client yesterday who has been to various doctors, who's been to various hospitals, but they couldn't find out exactly what was involved in terms of the hidden underlying conditions. That to me is a typical example of why these two should be working. One will be maybe through a stethoscope, will be able to see what really is causing the person to suffer. But if you use bones, you use other things like the Bible, other people use they use the cards, you will find other things that may not be apparent when you use a stethoscope. So within Kayimpi itself, this system is dating back to the 1700s. So Kayimpi is not a new practice. It has been there for years, and I've taken the responsibility as well as also the interest to go and investigate the details, in places like Englobo where it used to be. Can we move to the next slide? Now, how can these two systems complement each other? How can they be integrated? One wishes that, for example, in a village in Ngobo or in a village anywhere in the country, Ndumba, that is where the health practitioner or sangoma or Gqirha is working from, could be interacting with a clinic within that particular village. I think that is what the World Health Organization would want to have. You know, they would want to have these two systems, even at the most micro level, working together so that there could be understanding, you know, by one of the other. And then the WHO resolved, they took resolutions that these two systems have to be integrated. And when you look at the member countries, you'll find that they vary in terms of their performance. Our country, unfortunately, is far, far behind, because even if you go to the rural areas, you'll find that, as I've indicated, Ndumba and the clinic are not working together. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The African traditional medicine, as has been indicated earlier on, is a victim of colonization and apartheid, you know, through the Act, the Suppression of Witchcraft Act and other practices. I remember I was born in Kredok. If you were involved in healing using traditional medicine, you would be harassed by police. You know, they would come in, they would keep everything that's there, which is why a lot of people tended to move away, you know, from ATM, which I strongly believe has got a place to play. So if you look at the country itself, if it's more than 70% of the people using African traditional medicine, and then you find that this has been stopped or has been sort of like pushed out of the system, you'll find that, you know, that tends to create pressure in terms of the country's healthcare facilities as well as the fiscus. Because the fiscus, if you are going to have a clinic in each and every area, let's say for about 100 or let's say 150 to 200 people, we need a clinic. You'll find that we need more and more clinics because some of these things could be addressed through the African traditional medicine system. So that is why the WHO is aggressively looking at that. And within our country, unfortunately, there is no proper plan, you know, to follow that. Next slide, please. So the status of the African traditional medicine in South Africa, you will find that, as I've indicated, the majority of the people, even in places like Soweto, the big townships, you know, Sebokeng, you find lots and lots of people, not only, you know, traditional healers in the form of sangoma, you find umphrofethi, you find people who are using different types of healing, you know, umphrofethi for using water and prayer. You find that there will be sangoma and all of that. But the problem we have within the government itself, the Department of Health, you find that the traditional medicine directorate, it's more of a poor cousin. It's a lowly placed directorate, and it is expected that the director there is going to move from the department to go and tell the traditional healers that this is what the department wants from you. When in fact, there should have been a plan that each and every one of us is following in terms of the integration. Even the training and the accreditation of the traditional health practitioners, it is not in place. There is an act of 2007 which clearly indicates how it should be done, but you'll find that the act itself is not fully implemented. It's 2021 now. The act was promulgated in 2007, but there is no movement, because the problem is that a minister who comes in, if he or she doesn't believe in African traditional medicine, you would find that it will be suppressed even further than the suppression of the Witchcraft Act. So in other words, by whatever they do, our government, you find that they repeal the act, but they still, you know, act the same way that that act was used. Next slide, please. So there is a serious gap in terms of our primary healthcare system, because if you go to a village, if you go to a township, you'll find that the practice by ATM is more hidden. People hide it away from church people. They hide it away, you know, even from officials of government. Everybody sees it as something that is it's a strange practice that should not be part and parcel of the community. When in fact, the majority of the community, they use it. You can go to Bekkersdal, you can go to the Eastern Cape, you can go to the Limpopo. You'll find that people use traditional healing systems, although they are not recognized by the government. Now, what I think is important is that this neglect of this healing system is resulted in a lot of problems. When we look at our youth are a real lost generation, what is, because the traditional health system or the ATM that we should be following, you'll find that it's not only about the physical health of the individual, it relates to the spirituality, it relates to the rituals that each and every family should be conducting. And then you find that because it has been discouraged, a lot of families are not following, churches are against it. And then when people suffer, when there's a curse in the family, it's only then that people are starting to run around. It's very, very important to note that it's not only about the physical being of the person, the spiritual being of the person is very, very important. That is why a lot of our youth nowadays, you find that they get affected by many, many, many ills, like your drug problem, your alcohol problem, and lots of things. But when you use the bones and the other methods of diagnosing the problem, you find that the origin of the problem is the neglect of this system of healing. Next slide, please. Now, let me talk about COVID very briefly. When COVID started or was discovered in the beginning of 2019, there was a lot of reaction, there was a lot of panic. The Department of Health, they sent around guidelines, as to how people should conduct themselves, distance, for example, sanitizing and all such guidelines. So for the traditional health practitioners, we had meetings, several meetings, to discuss how do we respond. I think the reaction was that we should be following the guidelines of the department, whilst at the same time we promote the use of proven medicinal plants like the Artemisia afra, umhlonyane, the gum tree, eucalyptus, ginger bush, iboza, as well as sweet flag, kalamuzi, and others like umsuzwane. If you go to the rural areas, at any point in time, we'll find that people religiously use those, to boost their immune system as well as to protect themselves. So the demand for these products, for example, if you go to Faraday Market, which is not far away from Vets, Faraday Market, when you go there, you would find that those plants, the prices went up, as well as there was a shortage in terms of the supply, meaning that people believe in this. And also at that time when there was the problem of COVID, including now, still people use those because they believe that they've been used by their ancestors for years and years and years. I remember myself, my grandmother used to have umhlonyane, Artemisia afra at the back of the house. Even if you showed no signs of fever, they would give you that. So the intervention by the traditional health practitioners, it helped in easing the pressure on the poorly resourced health facilities in the country, especially in the townships and the rural areas. Next slide, please. Now, the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, from my point of view, I would say it demonstrated the need for the collaboration between the two healing systems. Sometimes a person would have severe COVID and the person would have to be taken to hospital. If you are a healer, a traditional healer, and understanding this, the healing system, that it is comprehensive and it is holistic, you would not stop a person from going to hospital to get the drips, to get oxygen and all of that. So the role of each and every one of these healing systems in South Africa, it's very, very important, especially if you look at the pandemic itself. And also the communication of the protocol. Those two would have to be coordinated. I'm saying here, last point on this slide is that regrettably, a lot of prominent traditional healing practitioners died. For example, a lady called Pepsile Maseko, died during that time. I think it must be about 6 months ago. When I attended a meeting yesterday of the traditional, traditional healers together with the Department of Environment to discuss sustainability, I heard that Pepsila's father immediately after that also died. The mother died, her sister died. And today there's a memorial service for another leader of the traditional healers called Dr. Conrad Tsiane. He also died. So it's COVID is a reality. Traditional healers have got no way, to ignore that it is a reality. And we also need to work with the Western type medicine in order to, to address it. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to conclude, because I've got only 10 minutes. The WHO all the time would always push that the member states, they have to integrate allopathic and the African traditional medicine. Countries like China are quite advanced. China, I'm in touch with the hospital in China that specializes in Chinese traditional medicine. They've done a lot of work in working with the Western type of healing systems in order to combat the impact of COVID. In India, the same. Unfortunately, again, I'm saying our South African government has got a lot to do, which I think this webinar is one of those very, very positive initiatives where we can start talking. One day we'll sort of introduce somebody with Ndumba in Soweto and somebody who's running a clinic in Soweto, just to hear how these view each other in terms of this collaboration and integration we're talking about. And also, it's very, very important, that our government supports the African Traditional Medicine Directorate there. That directorate, I doubt if they've got, I think staff members, there are about 3 of them for the whole country. And there's nothing that really you can do. So there's a need for decolonization of the minds of the South African societies, especially, when it comes to religion, they would view it differently and say, no, it's anti-God and this, which is not true. And also, I think the leaders in terms of our Department of Health, ministers, they've got to, to be sort of decolonized in terms of their thinking, because they still think as if they're at the medical school. We need to formalize the training and the registration of the traditional healers, because if we don't do that, we are going to open up for all these charlatans and such people who are not really interested in the long-term view in terms of healing. We want to look at the short-term objectives. Next slide, please, which I think could be my last one. Now, we have to, I think the department, maybe as a comment, would need to have some sort of ideas out of these workshops and webinars, as well as interacting with other people, just to develop a concept paper that indicates how can this be done? How can we integrate, allopathic and African traditional medicine at the practical level? Because if we want to change the minds of the ministers, it might take us a long time. This will go a long way towards meeting the KPIs of the World Health Organization in terms of integration, which at this point in time, it's embarrassingly far behind compared to other countries. So sharing of innovation between the two systems also is very important. We need to share the innovation, but at the same time, on the allopathic side, they need to understand that the African traditional medicine healing system is looking at spirituality, and they could use it as a backup. There are doctors I work with myself, and there are doctors who are my clients, and I am a client to them also, because there are things that I can't do, there are things that they can do which I can't do, there are things that I can do that they can't do. When I say I mean the traditional healing system, which is quite a vast system. It needs a lot of people to understand it, so that when we integrate, we will optimize the impact of these healing systems, including spirituality, including those who pray for their patients, and those who use certain interventions. They are mediums, for example, they are channelers. There are many, many people that we should bring together when we pursue this integration. Also, my last point is, I read an article here recently, about pandemics. They are saying here, the first point, pandemics are as old as humanity. And since ancient times, we have turned to plants to find solutions to health-related problems. I would like to broaden it by saying it's not only plants, it's also ancestral healing knowledge that has been there for years, as well as spirituality that we could use. With those few remarks, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mkhulu Songindaba, for the beautiful and very enlightening conversation and sharing of your knowledge in this aspect. By the way, Mkhulu Songindaba has mentioned that he is continuing to be a healer with some doctors being his clients and he being clients to the doctors as well. I would like to mention that Mkhulu Songindaba actually is my Mkhulu, as in I twasad in Stunywa as a grandchild to Mkhulu Songindaba. My Gobela, who twasad me is Tunywa, is a son of Mkhulu Songindaba from Kayimbi. Mkhulu Songindaba is also an agriculturalist who has for a long time been working in the developmental agriculture and still sits in some boards, including the Land Bank. So having said that, thank you very much, Mkhulu Songindaba. We are going to move to our next speaker. But before we move to our next speaker, Gogo Simenjalo, I would like just to summarize and remind the audience of 4 important aspects Mkhulu Songindaba has mentioned. He has mentioned the fact that traditional healing practice continues to be snubbed and therefore being marginalized by not only individuals, but also with the Department of Health that is trying to work with the traditional healers, but probably struggling to know how. He also mentioned that the traditional healing practice is an important part of the primary healthcare system, but it is least exploited because of this snubbing and marginalization and, of course, demonization of the process. But it is an important part of the re-engineering of the primary healthcare, where we are wanting to keep most of our patients accessing the primary healthcare level to reduce the burden at hospital level. The third aspect that he mentioned is the fact that there are certain physical manifestations in patients whose background and foundation is actually psycho-emotional, spiritual challenges and needs, which the Western medicine health system fails to be able to identify and to be able to heal. So it shows how important integrating these practices is to ensuring that all our patients are accessing healthcare in the most adequate manner. Without wasting time, I would move to Gogo Simenjalo, who's going to be our next speaker. Gogo Simenjalo is born in Swatini, in Swaziland, Eswatini. He is trained from the Zanusi Healing Institute. She also holds a BA in Health Sciences, majoring in psychology. Gogo Simenjalo is the founder of the Asante Stewart Foundation, which is an institution with the responsibility of helping in education of children with barriers in learning. She is currently the CEO of the Afrosavvy organization, an organization that shares knowledge and information around traditional healing practices and around African traditions. Over to you, Gogo Simenjalo. Yatogoza, thank you very much.
Togozani, can everybody hear me?
Togoza Gogo siyakuzwa.
Togozani. Sibongeni kakhulu bogogo, sihloniphe kakhulu wonke umuntu lokhona. Thokoza, sihloniphe mkhulu, sihloniphe wonke umuntu lokhona endlini, sihloniphe letihlwele tenu ngamunye ngamunye namadlodi wenu. I want to thank all the presenters, some before they have even presented, for this wonderful representation of what is termed traditional indigenous healing. The original healing ways of our ancestors is referred to as alternative healing methods because the colonialists replaced everything with their ways. And I appreciate the conveners and participants of this forum for the work being done to honor our indigenous ways of healing. We really, it's really appreciated because we can't lose it. Like Mkhulu has said in his presentation, the integration is actually really important. So thank you very much. So in a bid to preserve our identity, mainly the spiritual element, we at Afrosavvy research African indigenous methods of healing, which are holistic in nature in addressing psychological, physical, and also spiritual ailments. Our belief is that everything emanates from spirit, and if there is misalignment in that area, it manifests in disease. The African belief is that we have everything in nature that provides, or nature provides everything that we need for good health, physical and spiritual, not only through the sun itself, which we view as our God because it's the giver of life and gives life to all things on the planet, but through the rivers and mainly through the plants. I will refer everybody to Dr. Sebi at this point, I think, and also Dr. Jack-Pama's presentation, which did not go into as much detail as he could have based on Muthi, because he is a mine of information. I'm hoping that this platform will grow and give him the opportunity to actually share on the amount of work that he has done in this regard. He's not only just bringing on just recognition and awareness, but also honor in the way that he's actually addressing it. Because the way that things are, the way that things stand, things need to be looked at with a scientific view to get recognition in this world now. And Mkhulu, or Dr. Jack-Pama, Mkhulu Songindaba is actually doing that for traditional healing. We thank you, Mkhulu. Eating nutrition is key. Eating more natural foods like the plants ensures a less diseased human race. Poor diets are a result of colonialism. Through bringing back indigenous plants, like indolwane, for instance, as supplements for diet, many illnesses can be avoided. IBS, for instance, of indolwane, which is a natural probiotic. By incorporating this Muthi as part of diet, illness in the gut will be prevented. And when we prevent a lot of illnesses, it's been recognized that starts in the gut. So if we can work on the gut, a lot of illnesses will be prevented. So we have many medicines or many plants that work naturally in this sphere. And we say also, after all, prevention is better than cure. And that is actually how our Muthi is good. We speak, there's a lot of speak on supplements and other things. Our Muthi works as Muthi and also as supplementary to diets, which is good in preventing disease. It is this kind of research that we do at Afrosavvy, speaking to healers across Africa on best practice in indigenous healing and the use of our medicines across the world. The main platform we use for delivery is YouTube, which is mainly geared for the young and technically savvy. They use this for information in the manner that the older people utilize Google. The focus has mainly been spiritual healing, with little in terms of physical and the use of Muthi, because we've been doing our research and are now ready to share with the youth about the use of plant and physical healing and health preservation. Our work is mainly targeted at the youth and future generations, as the preservation of this wealth, that is our information, is going to be kept there. If the youth get this knowledge, the African Renaissance will be a reality. My belief is that the Asians are doing so well economically and in every sphere because they remained independent and have maintained their spiritual identity, which Africa unfortunately surrendered to colonialism. The things that we prepare, the forms of Muthi that we prepare, I can just look at briefly or mention briefly, is that, okay, there are many forms, let me start there, that there are many forms in which herbs can be administered, in the same way that there are many forms that these medicines, those Western medicines are administered. They use IVs and injections. In our case, there's also many other ways. We use, from our apothecary, in the Afrosavvy apothecary, we make herbal teas, we make decoctions, that are long-term boiled extracts, usually of the harder substances like roots and or bark. We make also macerations, which is the cold infusion of plants with high mucilage content. Plants are chopped and added to water and left to stand for usually 10 hours or above. There's also tinctures that we are working on. And in this one, we use alcoholic extracts of herbs, which are generally stronger than the herbal teas, sorry. And then there's also non-alcoholic tinctures using glycerine. Others still to explore are inhalation preparations, such as aromatherapy and essential oil extracts. There is a lot of work that has been done and is being done. I think I want to recognize this, not only at Afrosavvy, but across all traditional healers. The focus, mainly for me, has been to get the youth on board for preservation and also for health purposes, for preservation of the knowledge, and also so that we have healthier generations going forward. And we also have a youth that has a strong spiritual identity, because if we can start there and we can address that, it ensures the health of future generations, and it also ensures that the work of our ancestors lives on. Thokozani. I think this is actually where I end. Unless there are any, I will take questions when it's question time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gogo Simenjalo. That was a very enlightening sharing from you. Before we move to the questions from the audience, I would like to thank both Gogo Simenjalo and Mkhulu Songindaba. The message that I'm getting from Gogo Simenjalo in summary is, Gogo Simenjalo is saying to us, the many illnesses that we have, their basic foundation lies on inflammatory causes, particularly the inflammation of the gut. If you look at what she has been saying, this truly talks directly to the fairly newly emerged discipline of medicine, the anti-aging and functional medicine discipline. So in summary, Gogo Simenjalo is saying, if we could use the herbs that we have in our gardens, in our homes, or plant in our kitchens, the herbs that are anti-inflammatory, and use the plant foods that contribute to healing of our gastrointestinal systems, we would reduce the disease burden, particularly the burden of disease for chronic diseases. That's the message I'm getting from Gogo Simenjalo. Thank you very much. I would wish to thank our speakers, and I'm going to be going to our questions, and I'm taking questions from the audience. We have Judith Ramatanga asking, how do we get Christians to acknowledge that the two systems need to work together and not be judgmental towards one another? She was directing the question to Mkhulu Songindaba, but I'm not sure. I think between Mkhulu Songindaba, if they are happy to interchange in the answering, they could. Thank you very much. Question is, how do we get Christians to acknowledge the fact that the systems need to work together?
Let me respond by saying that, yeah, thank you. Let me respond by saying that, unfortunately, I'm a Christian, but unfortunately, the way Christianity was introduced as an alternative, you know, to the way people used to live and to the way people used to heal themselves. You know, people were encouraged to drop everything. Even some people within Christianity, they even quote the Bible, you know, when they want to, you know, to say lots of negative things about the African traditional medicine. But as Christians, also, if we're Christians, even if we're Muslims or any other faith, we must understand that, you know, life has been like this for years. Even before Christianity came into South Africa, life has been like this. So what is important, we must just look at how can these systems or these faith or philosophies work together. If we look at us at Kayimpi, we use the Bible when we diagnose, a person. We use the Bible bones. We also use ancestral methods that would make sure that all of those are integrated, and whatever comes out of that is something that cannot be denied by any of the systems that we've used in diagnosing. So I strongly believe that the view of Christians has got to be influenced by those who understand more about the African traditional system, by engaging them, discussing with them, showing them that this is not demonic. Instead, it is an integral part of our healing system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mkhulu. I hope you are answered, Judith. That has been a very enlightening answer from Mkhulu. I'm going to now quickly move to our next question, looking at the time challenges. Even though this could have been a nicer discussion with a longer time, I have a question from Bella Pitze. Bella is asking, do we have doctors that are both in the African traditional medicine and Western medicine? And how do they incorporate the two? I think I'm the appropriate person to answer this if Mkhulu Songindaba and Gogo, you would allow me to, because I'm the one Western medical doctor that is practicing African traditional medicine, and that's affected directly by this question. Do I have your permission, Marcos?
No, definitely. You're the most appropriate, definitely.
Thank you very much. I'm responding to Bella, but I'm not only going to truly directly be talking to Bella, I'm going to be talking to many people. And I think there are many people who have been having this question in their minds. And some are medics that are struggling with coming out to embrace their gift because they are stuck with being medical professionals and scientists. I've seen this a number of times, particularly on the medical students. There's quite a few of our vets medical students that are struggling with this. Bella, being a Western medical doctor who has a calling as an African traditional healer is the most challenging thing one can experience. Firstly, before you get to embracing and accepting using both, you have already defined yourself as a scientist. You have already been defined by the world, and you are carrying the label from the entire population that you are a learned, respected, evidence-based practitioner practicing Western medicine. And all of a sudden, you now come to wanting to tell the people that you have voices that tell you things. And in the Western medical fraternity, when you hear voices, you are most likely having schizophrenia. So coming out first to accept this and to disclose to the people that you are both feels very, very challenging. You sometimes feel like you have been stripped naked. It takes a long time to be able to master introducing that you are an African traditional healer when you are a Western doctor. This is coming from the history that we are carrying, the history that this indigenous knowledge system has been demonized, it has been ostracized, it has been labeled as witchcraft, it has been labeled as the practice of the dark world. With me in particular, it was most challenging because when I got the calling, I was a staunch born-again Christian. I tried everything I could try to run away from this, and the calling just would not stop. The only time when I started settling and being functional and being happy in my soul is when I embraced my calling and I started training as an African traditional healer. I am still going through the training processes. I have not finished the training processes. I have been going through Ukutwasa for the past 30 years. And what has made me to Twasa for 30 years is particularly having been called already being a qualified doctor. And now I'm going to share with you on a daily basis, living on a daily basis. It literally feels like you are stepping in and out of yourself. It feels like you are stepping in and out of your own life. Sometimes your head spins, but you go back to asking your spiritual guides to ground you, and you go back to your trainers to help you, because now when you are a medic who is an African traditional healer, you have a special challenge that the other traditional healers don't have, because you have this other life that you have to live fully in its principles. You do not walk around in the university wearing a mahiya and beads. Sometimes you wear a scrub suit, you wear a lab coat, you don't go around with it dumane on your hair, you wash your hair, you dress up. So it can be challenging. It is possible, it is doable. That's as far as I'm going to go for now, for today. I hope that answers you, Bella. I'm going to take one more question, and after that, recheck on my crew if we can still take some more questions. There's a question that is coming from Boniswa Kumalo. It's saying, how can we traditional healers involved in interdisciplinary theory like archaeology, when fossils, which is people's bones, are found, does that need to be traditional healers, or does that need a traditional healer's presence? Does that need cleansing? Is it acceptable to just find old bones and call them fossils and move on with your life? Or do we need a ritual for this? I think that's a very interesting question and the most powerful one. I will hand over to you, Mkhulu Songindaba and Gogo, to answer whoever would want to go first.
I'm not so sure if the question is clear to me, but let me say that if
should I repeat it for you? I can summarize it for you.
Just briefly. Yes, okay. Summarize it.
She's saying, for those who are in the interdisciplinary practices like archaeology, I assume she's an archaeologist or he knows someone. Mm-hmm. When fossils are being dug up, which is fossils are old people's bones, mm-hmm. Is it appropriate to just dig up these fossils and move forward as fossils found and continue with your archaeological life? Or in the spiritual fraternity of things, it is inappropriate? We need to have a traditional healer, we need to have these bones cleansed, we need to ask for permission from these bones to work with them. That's the gist of the question. Thank you, Mkhulu.
Okay, I'll just be very brief. You know, as a traditional healer, there are things that you don't even have to be taught about. There are things that you need to avoid, you know, just getting into. For example, in terms of graveyards, you can't just go to a graveyard because there are various spirits that are there. If you have to go there for whatever reason, you need to do some rituals and you need to cleanse after that. Even if you visit a family member, there are rituals that you need to do. Now, as an archaeologist or anthropologist, if you have to dig graves or skulls or anything, definitely that will affect you down the line, even if it won't do that. I mean, it won't happen immediately. It will affect you down the line because dead people have got lots of stories to tell. So you need to treat them with care. So I would caution, you know, just digging up and then treating that as a normal activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mkhulu Songindaba. Gogo Simenjalo, would you want to add anything? Do you have a contribution to this question to answer? Or are you happy?
No, I am actually happy. It actually is, our bones are very precious and the spirit still there. That is why we actually use them to divine, and we can use them to diagnose and do all sorts of things. So the treatment of those bones is something that should be done in a manner that they should be handled with honor and with respect. And it's not everybody that knows how to actually do that. We could, even as healers, we don't know the spirits of the people that were inhabiting those bones in previous lives. So also, even as healers, we have to find ways to approach graves that do not belong to our own people. So in this kind of work in archaeology, it actually is very tricky. We see, and it's not, it really is not a Black people thing or an African thing. Africans understand how that is precious. It's white people. It's always the white people that are happy and will eagerly go digging and looking for information. It's not a thing that our people do because of how we have been brought up. Even when we have not been taught specifically, there's just a kind of respect that we have towards things that had life previously. Thank you, Gogo.
Thank you very much, Gogo. I'm going to take just 2 more questions now, looking at the amount of time we have, and then we would be wrapping up our session. Thank you very much to all those who are asking questions, and thank you to Gogo and Mkhulu for your answers. I find this very enlightening, and I truly would sit in this webinar for the whole day and the whole night, but we have to adhere to our time promises. Now, there's one more question. The question is starting from Chuma Makunga. The question is, can anyone practice African traditional healing without hearing voices or being called? Meaning, in the true sense, can this be taught in a school or in a university to anyone who is not called to be a healer? Any of you between Gogo and Mkhulu, you're welcome to answer.
I think quickly, I just want to say that the starting point for traditional healing is the call. You have to be called, and that call should come from a particular person from your own ancestry, whether it is maternal or paternal. They have to call you. In some cases, you find that you are called by both the paternal and the maternal, and there's normally some chaos and some rituals that have to be conducted in order to make your life a bit stable. You cannot just go to the university or college or come to Kayimpi, to study, traditional, healing, because it has got to have a call. There must be a connection between you and the people who are calling you. If it is your aunt, if it is your great-grand-aunt, your great-grandfather, mother, they have to link up with you through dreams and other methods. So that's why I'm saying it's really not possible that you could just do it without a calling.
Thank you very much, Mkhulu Songindaba. I think Mkhulu, what he's trying to say is, as much as you go to a Peshweni to be trained now in the practice, but this is a gift. That's why it's called a calling. So those who end up going for the training and being trained are the ones that have been gifted and called. And then they would go to a Peshweni and they would get a Gobela who is now the trainer. And they would be trained into the principles and practices of the African traditional healing practice. It is becoming quite an interesting session. I see we have 2 minutes left, but there's one more question that we would like to take. And after that, we would have a Prof. Cook ending of the session. So we might go over by 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I hope that is not too much to request from my audience. The next question that we have is, why are we using the word traditional when this is an active practice? This is currently being practiced and we keep calling it indigenous healing. We keep calling it traditional healing. Why are we stuck with that word? And also, same question from the same person, next question from the same person. What are we saying about the commercialization of this practice and process? Those are the 2 questions.
Thokozani, may I just come in there? I'm happy to answer that one.
Thokoza Gogo.
Thokoza Gogo. It's, you know, we actually speak of this a lot about how our things are called alternative medicine. I understand even traditional. It's the alternative medicine that it's the other. We've been so othered. Mkhulu spoke of a poor cousin earlier, and that is what it is. Everything that is not pre-scientific forms of medicine are now known as traditional medicine or folk medicine even. This is what has been classified as alternative medicine. It is, which is tricky because 80%, 70% to 80% of the population relies on traditional medicine. Look at me also calling it traditional medicine for their primary healthcare needs, because that's what it has been. It's a big challenge, actually. I mentioned the Asian community earlier in my presentation, that I believe that they are so developed and are ahead of everybody now in every way, economically and every way. It's because they preserved their spiritual identity, one, and two, they preserved their ways. And in that space, alternative medicine is actually the Western medicine. Their medicine is not referred to as traditional or alternative. Theirs is the number one in their space. So I think that is how we have lost track. And in time, hopefully, and with the work that is actually currently going on by the healers themselves and Spirit herself, we are actually going to get there. I spoke of the African Renaissance becoming a reality in the spiritual, because it will not be real without it being real in the spiritual space first. We need to reclaim ourselves, our spirit, and who we are for everything else to grow. So that is actually where we are at. It is called traditional. It's called traditional because of the current state, but it's something that we are actually all should be working towards changing as we turn things around and become our African selves again. Thank you.
Just to add, why we call it traditional, it is because this healing system, it exists within a tradition. And in other words, it's long established healing system. It doesn't mean that traditional means that it's something that used to happen. We still have the traditions, and this healing system exists within that. Now, in terms of commercialization, I just want to say that, for example, when we mix all these herbs, you know, Mklonyan and others for COVID, you have to have a price, because everything has got a cost. You have to have a price. And by doing that, it doesn't mean that you are commercializing it. But also, I think I need to say that some healers, some traditional healers, they tend to commercialize in a negative way, where you tend to, just to take people for a ride for something that you could ask, let's say 200 Rand, you ask 20,000 Rand. That is not commercialization. It is more like robbing people. When you talk about traditional healing system, there must be a cost and a bit of a margin on that so that you can be sustainable in terms of what you provide as a service. Thank you.
Thokoza Mkhulu, siyabulela. I'm truly going to take just 2 more questions. I was supposed to take just 1 question, but there's a compelling question that would be our last question, which I think ties up well to Prof. Cook's summary. I'm taking the first question, and then the last question would be the question that I'm thinking Prof. Cook is the appropriate person to answer and tie it together with his summary. The next question is, I don't see, I think it's coming from Sanele. Sanele is saying, the indigenous healing practices incorporate aspects both from darkness and from light. How does one navigate across these pivots? If I could be allowed, Mkhulu nawe Gogo, I would like to take answering this one. Thokoza Mkhulu. Sanele, I'm going to be saying to you, this is one aspect that is quite a bit of a challenge in the current traditional healers and current traditional healing practice, in the fact that as a traditional healer, to be able to heal even illnesses and presentations that are adversities coming from witchcraft, you have to understand witchcraft. And witchcraft belongs to the dark side, the dark spirits. Now, how do you navigate a life where you are able to see in the dark side, you are able to manipulate dark spirits, and you are called a healer? A healer is someone who gives life. A healer is a person of light. This now is where one's belief system, one's knowledge of who they are, one's knowledge and understanding of what the gift givers want, and one's ethics are tested. Personally, I have decided to stick to knowing myself as a Christian, which I have always been, even before taking up African traditional healing practices. I remain a Christian. I remain a healthcare practitioner who is an enhancer and a giver of life. Therefore, I put my principles of practice and my ethical approach to everything to that knowledge and understanding. And the important thing, and what is important to be known by people who are not within the fraternity, is Amagedla, which is the healers who are specializing in Muthi. Amagedla know Muthi for all sorts of usages, but healing is healing. Healing is of light. You would get Igedla telling you that if you use Muthi for dark purposes, you would have to completely cleanse yourself, cleanse your Meti, cleanse your Ndumba, cleanse your Skodlo, because it actually brings the energy of darkness. So what I'm saying in essence is those who are true healers, those who are continuing to be the super able, good healers from nature, nature refuses this to be of the darkness. Hence, you would need to re-cleanse the entire space if you dare step into dark practices. However, it goes back to everyone's ethical standard. It goes back to everyone's practice choices and what they want to be and what they want to become, to be able to know how to navigate between having an ability to look into the spirits of light and look into the spirits of darkness. I'm not sure if Mkhulu and Gogo want to add anything to this before I move to the last question that would be preempting Prof. Cook's summary. Mkhulu and Gogo, anything? Are you happy?
I think my comment on that one would be, the traditional healing system, by virtue of what it is something that is spiritually clean. It's something that has got to be done to heal, not to harm, not to kill, not to cause any problems. If, for example, those who work with us here at Khaimbi, they know we discourage any dark use of this calling or the gift. It has got to be used to create light. If a family comes to you that is in the darkness, they've got a curse, they've got this, they've got all sorts of socio-economic problems. Yours is to bring light, but there's no one who can come to you to create, to bring about darkness on the other person. That we don't allow, because it's a complete philosophy. It's something that I think the suppression of the Witchcraft Act of 1957 was trying to stop. Creating darkness to others is not really what we should be doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mkhulu. In the interest of time, we're already 9 minutes over now. I'm going to quickly take the last question, and I would request Prof. Cook, if he can, to be the responder to the question and tie it up with his closing message to this webinar. The question, Prof, is coming from Sibusiso Sbeko. He says, what is the follow-on activity or program from this webinar that will take the conversation forward to a practical level? As traditional health practitioners, we have attended a whole lot of talk shops and a number of conversations. Nothing practical has truly been taken forward from both government and private sector, including academic institutions. That's the question. Over to you, Prof. Cook. Thank you very much.
Siyabulela nonke. Andikwazi ukushwankatela to summarize kakuhle namhlanje. I think that would be perhaps a little arrogant, because we certainly want to take the conversation. Siyaqalile namhlanje. Kodwa ndiyafuna ukuzama ukucacisa indlela yaphambili, the way forward a little bit, because we have to get practical, and I'm really so grateful to our speakers today and to yourself, Dr. Makunga, but for us to have started the conversation here. And what I'd like to propose is really something of a practical way forward from the WITS perspective, from the Faculty of Health Sciences perspective, because really we need to stick with our core business, our niche, if I may, colleagues, in that is the education and curricular perspective. And what I'd like to propose is that we have really a two-part process. One, looking forward a little bit, is that we have a couple of workshops in which we start to identify the specific competencies, and that's from a knowledge, skills, and attitudes perspective, by which we can start to consider African traditional medicine and indeed potentially other indigenous medicine cultures into our health sciences curricula. And that would mean not to advocate one way over another potentially, but rather to start off with, for example, around balance, to look at how do we deal with seeing things not as dichotomies, not just as Christianity on the one side, vis-a-vis ATM on the other, or as biomedical on the one side versus a more biopsychosocial approach on the other, whatever it happens to be, but rather as a balanced approach to all of the interdependent components within our health systems, as has been so eloquently spoken about by both of our speakers today. And so if we set up a couple of workshops for next year, then that would, I would be happy for us to make it quite open, to be honest, so that we don't keep it, necessarily in-house with a few of us looking at it, but rather, we could even have such a webinar session to look at some of those competencies that we might be able to bring in, and perhaps guided by a couple of us as educationalists. But in preparation for those workshops, we could have indeed our speakers from today and perhaps one or two others who could, David Sebeke and others come into mind with the fabulous contribution potentially from the Adler Museum to then craft those workshops, or to have some ideas around that particular practical aspect or practical way forward, and others. And we could have our first conversation around that even later this year, and before the end of the year, with a view to then having a couple of more substantial workshops next year. And then we'd look to introduce within the second half of the year, potentially, for a dedicated group of students, health science students, within a specific program, so we get practical, some specific training or educational engagements around this particular topic. That's what I would propose, Chuma and colleagues, if we could perhaps proceed in that way.
Thank you very much, Prof. Cook. I think it's an exciting suggested way forward, and it is also exciting to actually see Wits University, the institution itself, showing its commitment and practical readiness in taking this up. So we wish to commend your department and everyone who's working with you, Prof, and we Atamagush. And before we bring this to an end, allow me to cut the questions that are still flowing in the interest of time. We are going to be putting some summaries in our website and possibly some answers to the questions that tend to look compelling. So anyone who has a question that has not been addressed, please do not despair. Look up in the website. It might be one of those that are answered there together with the summaries. So in that note, I would assume that Prof Cook, since ete akana wamazwi wokushwangathela, Prof Cook, my principal, is giving me the honor to shwangathela this ndibano ngqungquthela, this meeting today. So I will. And Prof Cook, as much as I accept the honor with open hands as your junior within the department, but ngokwesintu amakhosi ngabantu abakhulu. Xa uhleli nesangoma, isangoma siso esiphatha indlu. Ndiyacamagusha kuni makhosi, ndiyacamagusha kuni mabandla amahle, ndiyacamagusha kuni bogogo nabomkhulu. Ndiyacamagusha amabandla enu enihamba nawo benikunye nawo kule ngqungquthela yanamhlanje. Ndiyacamagusha ndibulela i-institution yaseWits, ndibulela isihlwele sikaProf Cook, ndibulela isihlwele sayo bonke abantu abakwi-health sciences. Ndingalibalanga ukuzikhaya. Ndiyacamagusha ndibulela kuni bakwaMdluli, ndibulela Makunga, ndibulela Mafuzafulele njengelifule mvula, ndibulela Rhadebe, ndibulela abakulomama, ndiyacamagusha. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our webinar today, and we wish to thank you everyone who has made time to join this conversation. And we are looking forward to many of you being part of the journey as we take this initiative that we started today forward. On behalf of Prof Cook, the Department of Family Medicine, and the Health Sciences Division, I wish to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thokoza.
Thank you very much. Siyabonga, sibonga kakhulu. Ngokuba khona lapha, siyabonga kakhulu. Thanks.
Gogo Simenjalo.
Thank you,
Ngafuna ukuvalelisa. Oh, I think she's gone already. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the team that put this together. Gogo, was that you?
It was me, but my dogs are making noise, Gogo.